So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this sunny Wednesday for another meeting of the NEECE Talbot Innovation Exchange. This is a business forum that has been established in partnership with NEECE Talbot Council with the support of UK Community Renewal funding for the region. We're really delighted to be partnering with the council to host this forum, bringing together businesses in the engineering, manufacturing and innovation and technology sectors across the county. And what is becoming really clear is what a fantastic array of local businesses are operating in NEECE Talbot. And I can say that most people are just not aware of the calibre of firms and the range of opportunities that exist right here on our doorstep across the county. And so what we can do through this forum and ongoing is to really spotlight the businesses that are thriving in the county, try and sing the benefits of co-locating in NEECE Talbot as a real hotbed of manufacturing, engineering and innovation, and encourage everyone really to look to the future, think about growth opportunities, business support opportunities, and really from the council's perspective, understanding what it is that local firms need in order to survive, thrive and grow across the county. So we've been really, really grateful for all the time that you guys have devoted to come and talk to us over the last few weeks and months, sharing your priorities and perspectives, and we're hoping to hear from more of you this afternoon. And there are some real opportunities that we're keen to spotlight, so we've got some speakers joining us to share some of those later on in the meeting. We're going to try and wrap ourselves up shortly after 2, or certainly by 2:30. I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time, and we'd love to get into a discussion before we hear from our speakers and explore some upcoming opportunities. In particular, we'd love to get your insight on, what business support is needed by local firms, because there are some opportunities upcoming, another round of UK government funding that the council is bidding into in the near future, and I know Adil from the council is really keen to get insight and input from all of the businesses in the room. Adil, are you okay to take over and just talk to us a little bit about the Shared Prosperity Fund and insights from your perspective on that?
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Welcome everyone, and thank you for everyone attending, all the businesses and the presenters. So I'm Adil Pramod from Economic Development in NEECE Talbot Council. For those who may not know me, as Dawn has mentioned, we've got an opportunity to look at potential funding bids with UK government, which is under the Shared Prosperity Fund. And one of the key things that we want to do going forward, not only at today's event, but other events going forward, is to constantly have feedback, direction and guidance and input from the businesses in relation to what you would see as your key requirements going forward. So in terms of business support side, so whether that relates to property, skills, whatever the key issues are, if it's issues around innovation and development, now there's a definitive timeline we have for the working process for the Shared Prosperity Fund. So we see this as a partnership, that the fact that the businesses can help us in terms of informing us of what you see your requirements and needs are, that would help to influence and shape what we can look to do. So this is very critical. And if any of the businesses that you're aware of that you speak with aren't at today's meeting, could you please make sure have those sort of discussions with them, pass a message on, because we would like to set up a specific event in and around this, and it can be as extensive of covering, as I said, direct business support, property, skills, and so on as well. So we are keen to have a series of events in and around this, so the businesses feed in. So that's very important, and that's pending, and we need to start that process now. So I'd like to hear from you from that. The other thing is we may be also looking to explore the development of some focus groups as well in different areas as well. So please come forward with your ideas. Again, this forum is there for you, so you can shape and devise it as you wish. So we're very clear about that as well. In previous forums, there was mention about the skills and sort of training and people and recruitment elements type of things. Again, we'd like to see whether businesses are willing to come together and to go into presenting to schools and colleges. Again, I'd like your comments back on that, and please feel free to ask questions and queries. And just for everyone to be aware, again, and we'll ask for the region to share this information as well. There's a consultation working on the innovation strategy from Welsh Government. Now, some of you businesses may have already benefited from the previous programme of financial support. So it's critically important for you as businesses to give your feedback to shape the new programme. So that consultation is open now, and it's on for the Welsh Government's innovation strategy. So we will share that information for the region, and they can send information out to yourselves on that. So, yeah, just to close off, saying we continue to want to see this forum as being your forum. So please do come forward with ideas and suggestions as well, and even the development of sort of subgroup developments and discussions as well. So thank you very much for your time. And back to you, Dawn.
Thank you, Adil. So I'm looking for raised hands of anyone who wants to come in and share perspectives. But thinking about future design of business support in the county, what would benefit you, or tell us a high point story of when business support has really worked well, or the types of support that have been beneficial in the growth and development of your company that might be over recent years or over recent decades. What works and what would you like to see more of? There is an opportunity now. We're obviously, Wales is losing out in some ways from the change in the funding regime, but on the other hand, it's a blank slate. It's a clean sheet of paper. What should UK government funding support post-Brexit? Is there a different approach that would work, or do we want to recapture some of the stuff that has worked over the last decade? So lots of questions, but really keen to understand from your perspective what support has worked for you. I'm looking at you, John, from Rhino Systems. I'm looking at you, Ian, from AV Coatings. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What works?
Well, I think what we'd be interested in as a company is to be put in touch with people who are likely to use our services or products. And while I appreciate you may not have, if you like, a direct line into sort of private contracts, there's a lot of UK government stuff being tendered, if you like, and we'd like to, I think in this region, certainly get first shout at it, especially if it's in Wales.
It's a key thing, isn't it? Making sure buyers, particularly in Wales, are aware of and connected to locally based businesses who can support what they need. So what sort of buyers from your business, John, are you already working with major buyers in our region, or are there particular buyers that you're keen to connect with?
The sort of people, I mean, just for the benefit of everybody else, we make high performance industrial doors, and by that I mean the sort of thing that goes into a nuclear power station to protect against terrorist attack, or a fire door or a blast door that can take 100 kilograms of explosive against it. So that kind of thing. They're special purpose doors, but we do have a healthy market in what they call the CPNI market, which is basically the protection of national infrastructure. And these are basically all government, key government installations, all MOD installations, and all important utilities like water, treatment plants, major electrical installations, that kind of thing. And that's got to be, while there's a a substantial private market there. There's also a huge government market, and I'm just interested really to see how the exchange could, shall we say, perhaps change government attitudes or local government attitudes to make sure that any of that kind of work is offered locally before it's offered outside the region.
Yeah, thank you, John. Adil, would you like to share any thoughts on what John has said there?
Thank you, John. The forum is hopefully is forming part of that sort of offering. I think having private companies come to the table obviously may not be possible, but there are different sort of organizations, entities, and again, I just want to get a gauge. So, for instance, have made contact with the MOD. And MOD have confirmed that they are willing to sort of come to this forum. And I know, John, you've mentioned MOD, and I know some of the other companies that are also in that supply chain. So would you feel it beneficial of having an event in and around that? Because it's the commercial senior partner manager for the MOD that is willing to come and present, and they'd be presenting about how to get into contracts and supply chains. But that's obviously one only specific sector. The nuclear side and so on, we'll take that on board and see if there's opportunities there. The opportunities we do try and present obviously have to be encompassing a wider range of businesses. But in addition to that sort of thing, John, as well, like I said, so do let me know about what your thoughts are about an MOD, because these would be the key contacts that any business would need to use to go into supply chain contracts. But one other question as well, if you look at the future for right now, so I understand the contract side of things as well, but are there any other challenges, whether it's property related, innovation development related? Because I know of some of the innovation developments with right now, because I facilitate some of the link ups with Smart Cymru. Yeah. And again, as I think Dawn clearly said, there's a preset opportunity here for businesses to influence what you see coming forward as business support. So I take on board everything you said about that, and I think an MOD event could be a great opportunity for you to explore into sectors or areas of MOD development. There, you'll have direct contacts so that people are willing to come and engage. But just to sort of turn it a little bit, going forward, what would you see things that would help Rhino? And I'm not on about, I understand we will take on board the direct sales element or the contacts from supply chains, because
what other challenges might the business need support with or benefit from?
Okay, well, just to sort of close up the sales bit, the MOD event would be hugely useful, I think. I mean, we do have good contacts in the MOD, but given the size of the organisation, you can never have too many. Likewise, nuclear. So that would be very useful to us. In terms of non-sales type support, I mean, things that we continuously, and I won't say they're sort of showstoppers, but they're significant irritants, if you like, is finding specialist suppliers. In particular, just give an example, just finding a stainless steel polisher who will do the job at a sensible price. That's a concern for us. Skills are always a concern. I mean, we use a lot of welders, and we're always keen to continue to develop welding skills. And I think I speak for a lot of people in this forum, especially on the industrial side, is the lack of suitable premises. I think with the deindustrialisation of Wales, what we're seeing is a lot of what I call factory premises, as opposed to warehouses or offices, have just disappeared. Facilities, for instance, with overhead craneage are just really becoming rare. So if there was a way if you like, for anybody who's got these kind of facilities to be able to showcase them to other people who may be on the lookout for premises. That would be very useful for us.
You're right, John, that does come up repeatedly in these discussions. Businesses whose growth ambitions are constrained by the need for the right kind of industrial space. So it would be interesting to hear from partners in the room on that. And we think that might warrant further discussion specifically around who has available space, you know, because often it's other businesses, isn't it, that has needs have changed and have space, or potential collaborations to redevelop space and maybe some support to do that. Do those thoughts resonate with any other participants on the call today? Ian, what are your thoughts? Oh, hang on. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you. Is your headphone definitely plugged in there? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 minutes. Yeah, I'll come back to you. That's great. All right. Well, while we wait for Ian, would anyone else like to reflect on what John has shared? Anything resonate there in terms of some of those issues? Yes, please, Paul.
I hope you can hear me. I don't.
Yes.
Excellent, because I don't normally use Zoom. I forget how to make it work normally on Teams. On a wider point about, particularly about Shared Prosperity Fund, I think a point I'd very much like to make, and make whenever, in fact, I've been making for the last 18 months, one of the big things we're going to lose from the Shared Prosperity Fund and the way it's arranged is kind of sector-specific funding. You'll probably all remember that the last ERDF settlement in Wales, WEFO allocated 100 million euros purely for marine energy, and obviously that's my area of interest. And Magnus, my colleague, will also be presenting today. There's no way of, or it appears to be very difficult to replicate that now. That'll be important to all sectors, but our sector, marine energy, we've got a massive, huge opportunity in South Wales with the potential for developing floating wind in the Celtic Sea. And the more that local authorities and businesses can get together to try to maximise the benefits that are drawn down in South Wales from that opportunity, the better. And the lack of a kind of coordinated ask into this Shared Prosperity Fund, I think, is damaging to that potential effort. I've just put a link into the chat. There's an organisation that's been set up that's led by my organisation, the Celtic Sea Cluster. I think we're probably going to end up renaming it the Celtic Sea Supply Chain Cluster. But it's free to join, free to register. And as things go forward, we will be looking not just in South Wales, because it's a Cornish Welsh initiative, but we will certainly, Magnus and I will be fighting South Wales' corner in there. And it will give people sight of what the opportunities are and ways that they can engage to try and maximise those opportunities. But I think the lack of a sector-specific funding pot at a shared prosperity fund is something that everybody's got to work on. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Thank you for sharing. I mean, the shared prosperity funding that's live at the moment have identified 3 themes, and you're quite right, they're not sector specific at all. You know, people and skills, business growth, and connected communities being the kind of 3 priorities. And so there is that change from what WEFO would have done, and it will be challenging to kind of navigate that new landscape and, you know, really make the most of the kind of key growth sector opportunities that are on the table. Adil.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, this, Paul, thank you for that. I think it's very important that businesses, as well as organisations like the ORE, Catapult and MEECE, don't really like using the term lobbying, but to make these representations, because there is The Shared Prosperity Fund, whilst it's geared towards a number of sort of type of organisations in the sectors, it obviously includes that sort of offshore wind and sort of tidal, that sort of opportunity. UK government were looking to channel other sort of development opportunities via other funding. So there are some other streams coming forward, but there needs to be a strong representation from organisations and businesses to say that the funding is required and needed. Okay, so I would encourage you all to voice your sort of concerns, your views and opinions to the relevant organisations and entities, and even give us feedback, and we'll try and channel that in as well.
Thank you, Ian. Any joy? It's such a challenge, isn't it, with the tech?
Hello. Can you see me?
We can't see you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Right, that's something. And yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I got new toys here, and these things don't work.
Oh no, that's great.
It's just a few points, really. Yeah, in regards to buildings, we first of all, I can give you a bit of a background. We're an engineering company historically, only open cast and welding repairs, but now we've moved over to polymer coatings and foam for protective coatings. And now we've actually moved, a lot of our industry is revolved around the military and with the offshore. So we manufacture a lot of flotation buoys and deep sea, some deep sea buoys and surface flotation buoys, but we're not a very large company. And most of the companies we work for or with are based up north of England. We can't seem to get anywhere local we can speak to. So it would be interesting. And I noticed there's a few here now here today, which I'd like to connect with and maybe have a chat at some time or other. So see if we can, if there's some common ground, and maybe we can get some work going together. We have got obviously a yard, which is only about 4,000 or 5,000 square feet building, but we've got 2.5 acres of land. And we are in the process of putting up another building, which is 15,000 square feet. And it will have a crane with 12.5 tons lifting capacity. But I reckon that'll take us a few years before we can get to that stage. But we have got the steelwork ready to go. So if there's anybody on listening now who would like to contact me later on and see if there's anything we can work on projects, it would be really interesting to find out. I know there's companies down in Pembroke we haven't really approached. We need to, especially the gas and oil. So yeah, that's basically it really. And it would be nice to speak to somebody locally. But we do work for the large companies. We've done work for Trelleborg, Subsea Energy Solutions we are working for now. So we've got a fair bit of work on, but we are quite a well-kept secret. And that's our own fault really. We don't really promote ourselves enough, which we are trying to resolve, but it takes time. So yeah, if there's anybody who wants to chat to me later on, it'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, I my ears have pricked up when you've talked about kind of connecting with potential collaborators, potential new customers here in our region. You know, and I guess there are companies in Pembrokeshire, in particular industrial sectors. You know, how might we facilitate those kind of connections across the region and join up those opportunities and provide opportunities for businesses to sell themselves? I think it's clear that companies are so busy, and you know, we've talked a lot in this forum about kind of there you are, I can see you. We've talked about the challenge of getting the right staff, isn't it? And for having enough people to go out and do networking and get your name out there is a challenge. Yeah,
I don't know what hat to wear half the time. You know, we are relatively small. I think we punch above our weight sometimes, but that's not a bad thing. You know, we're always up for a challenge, and we do take on quite you'd be surprised, even we surprise ourselves sometimes, but we do take on quite the jobs that a lot of the larger companies won't take on, because sometimes of risk factor maybe, and we take some of the smaller contracts which the large companies don't seem to be interested in. So, it's
Yeah,
good for us. It's good. Yeah.
And from previous conversations, Ian, random inquiries and ideas that come into your team where you are able to respond in quite innovative ways as a small team and offer things and try things out.
We don't want to. We want to get bigger, and the work is out there. We know we can do it, and I'm sure we could get a lot more. We got systems in place. We got the yard. We got the steel work to put up another 15,000 square foot building. We're going to put up a smaller one to begin with, and we got the planning permission in place as well. It's just like everybody else on here, I suppose. It's the money. You need a lot of money to get the staff, the building to put up. But I'm an optimist. I'm pretty sure we will get there. And I know we're quoting for a lot of jobs, but it is frustrating. These jobs, all these customers are based up and off, even Scotland, yeah, everywhere. And then, of course, we do work for the military as well, but that's mainly research and development work. It's quite interesting work. And I know we've got at least 2 years work ahead of us, just on one contract. But there's something else we need to develop yet again. We can do a lot of that, more of that as well. But yeah, if there's anybody else that wants to have a chat with me sometime or other, I'm all yours.
Thank you, Ian. Adil, your hand is up.
Yeah, just to answer some of maybe some of the issues that Ian has raised from AV Coating. So one of the reasons for today's presentation, Marine Energy Wales, Jay's online here as well, obviously based in Pembroke. So some of the things that you mentioned about maybe making those connections with companies and organizations and current project developments is the rationale for the today's presenters. So hopefully that will help towards making those links and contacts. But also it'll showcase the real opportunities that present themselves. Similar mention to you as well, obviously, Ian. The MOD have confirmed that they would like to, they would be interested in coming to present. I presume that you would find that valuable.
Yes, most definitely would do. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Yeah. And then again, a similar question to put to John. Whilst we understand the description and the current situation that you've described, going forward again, what key support, what key things, what key issues do you need to address to help your business grow? And if it's in terms of people and skills, and I'm not saying about the financial cost of a person, but is it a problem of getting the right people? Is there an issue of funding your growth, or funding the build of the property, or funding the investment into capital? Could you give us an idea or a flavor of what you see in those sort of scenarios that would help your business going forward?
Okay, I mean, capital support is always handy, but I would not say that it would stop us investing in the worst case. It's very good to have support from yourselves, and thank you very much for the recent support. We do appreciate it. What for us is a bigger problem is connecting with markets, because we are in such a niche that unless we're aware that a project is happening, we can't go out and bid on it, if that makes sense. For years, and we're doing well at it now, is basically we've used our website as a grocer's shop, and people see the portfolio of products that we have to offer, and they pop in, and if they like our prices and our proposal, they buy from us. But we want to get a lot more proactive in actually identifying projects as they come up and getting in there, because the nature of our business is that we don't deal with the end user. We always deal with a contractor or a subcontractor. And unless you get in there very early, you can often lose the window to quote, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's
does make
the real big issue for us.
Yeah, understanding the opportunities before it's too late. And as you say, as a subcontractor, I think we've come across this, whereby the main contractor or the tier one contractor will already have decided who there will be before they've tendered for a job. And so then that opportunity is kind of sewn up very early on. So it's kind of the early doors awareness.
Yeah, if you're not there, you can't quote, if you know what I mean. So it's a big issue for us.
I wonder if there's something around the kind of visibility of the different capabilities and sort of market sectors of local firms, whether a kind of audit or survey of what local firms can offer, what they can do, the types of capabilities that they have, and the market sectors. I mean, perhaps the council already have a clear visibility of this, but for some of us, it would potentially enable us to spot those opportunities, and for each other, really know who does what. You know, you've mentioned some supply chain opportunities. What did you say? Yeah, stainless steel polishers, for example, and understanding who needs what and who does what.
I think that would be valuable within Wales, because I mean, we're not a big company, and we always prefer to do locally for obvious reasons. So we would, every time we would like to really just, be able to look at a directory of local services like the Yellow Pages, I suppose, and be able to say, okay, these are the guys that are in the business around here. Let's give them a ring. I think from the point of view of having a group of companies listed in this area as offering their services to bigger customers then outside the area, I think you've got to be very careful there, because you've got to understand how these guys look for suppliers. And in our case, they don't really, how do I put it, they don't really look for suppliers. They expect people to sort of almost know it through clairvoyance that the project's coming up. And we've got a number of strategies which we're looking at, which is based around the use of market intelligence, and I think we're going to have to pay for that. But I suppose that's really what we're after. If somebody could give us assistance with market intelligence, we'd be very pleased.
Great insight. Thank you, John. I think that's really helpful, and it's a conversation to continue. And keep that thought in mind, any other businesses in the room, because we'll come back to this discussion and Adil's particular question, what are the constraints and the challenges regarding business growth? Is it skills and people? Is it funding for certain things? Is it support in different areas? What are the constraints on your growth, and what would help businesses to grow? So really understanding that kind of market intelligence side, support with introductions to potential clients, customers, market sectors and opportunities. I think that's really come through strongly already today, but keep that question in mind. What are the constraints on your growth, and what would help? And we'll return to this discussion, I'm sure, over the coming weeks. Is there anyone we haven't heard from that would like to just speak up on that particularly? What are the constraints on your growth? What business support would help? And if not, we'll move on to hearing from our speakers for today, and allow a bit of time for some Q&A after those presentations. Okay, in the absence of waving hands, I'm going to go with that then. I'm going to move on to the second part of the session this afternoon. And we're delighted to have 3 short presentations to share. The first of those is Paul Elsmore from the ORE Catapult and MEECE, and we're talking today really about manufacturing and supply chain opportunities, but with this particular focus on, I don't know, you'll explain it, Paul, offshore and marine, etc. So may I hand over to you? If you'd like to share your screen, I think you have got permission to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, how long do you want this to last for?
About 10 minutes, please.
Okay,
8 to 10, and
I'll try.
I'll interrupt you if it goes on much longer.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Let me. Right, now I've got to remember the right order to do things on. Slideshow. And no, that won't do it. Bear with me.
No problem.
I should have shared my screen first, presumably. I think if I share that one.
Okay, yep, that looks like it's working. Great.
Is that's not in presentation mode though, is it?
Not yet, no. That's it.
Can you see the full thing, or are you seeing my notes screen?
I'm seeing your notes as well, but
right, so I just got to swap those over.
There we are. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. It takes a while to remember the different systems.
Don't worry, we've all been there.
Okay, so I'll start. My job here really is to introduce ORE Catapult as an organisation. My colleague Magnus will then give us some specifics about the Marine Energy Engineering Centre of Excellence project, which we run out of Pembroke Dock. So catapults are a publicly funded set of organisations. There's 9 of us. I've highlighted in red there your local Compound Semiconductor Applications Catapult. The important things to know about us are we're in sectors where UK government thinks we can be real world leaders. So we're publicly funded and we're all not for profit. We do some research, but we're much closer to markets than universities, for instance, and we're much smaller than universities, except for one case. We don't give out grants. So the way that we work with companies is we build consortia, and then we go and bid for funding from other sources, usually Europe or Innovate UK, and we deliver projects in collaboration with those companies. My catapult, the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, we consider ourselves to be the leading technology and innovation research centre for offshore renewables, and that's wave, tidal range and wind. And our key aims are to grow the UK economy within our sector, but also to lead the transition to a low carbon economy. We're completely UK wide, as you can see on that map. We're about 200 technical staff, over 250 staff in general. So that catapult is actually the size of a decent university department, not as big as some of the big university departments. We do have a base in China now, but basically we've got 8 regional centres where we deliver everything that Catapult delivers UK-wide on a regional basis, and we also have some academic research hubs. I'm showing our base in Pembroke Dock there, but we've just recently opened an office in MSpark on Anglesey, so we cover South Wales and North Wales now. Just a bit of a boast about what we do, what we've achieved. We've supported a lot of SMEs through these collaborative projects, quite a few international projects as well. We have 250 million quid's worth of test facilities, absolutely huge test facilities as well. The headings there have changed slightly. We've had a kind of internal rebrand, but the activities are roughly the same. So the test and validation work we do is some of it's commercial, but basically we can test these big offshore wind turbines, their blades, their structures in our offices in Blythe. The operational performance directorate is looking at operations and maintenance of offshore wind farms in particular. And it's all about making that safer, cheaper, and these days greener. My own directorate, Research and Disruptive Innovation, it's not called that now, but it does the same thing. We're here to support and accelerate innovation in the UK supply chain. And just to give you an idea, offshore wind is on a massively upwards curve. Government has decided, UK government's decided that net zero is going to require vast amounts of offshore wind. I'll mention in a moment what that means for South Wales as well. And just to give you one aspect of what we do, we're working with GE Renewable Energy, helping them design and build the world's largest offshore wind turbine. Hasn't been installed anywhere yet, but it's near its capability to be installed on a bankable basis. So that means that the project developers can get funding to build out using a turbine like this because they trust it. In general, we have kind of 4 strands of behaviour that we support. So we have our own internal thought leadership capability, and that allows us to influence policy. We, as Adol says, we don't like lobbying as a term, but we act as a kind of go-between between industry because we understand what their needs are, what their barriers are. But we're funded through government, so we have very good channels back into government. And so we use our influence there. We are a trusted third party for our sector, which is the whole of the offshore renewables industry. And so we have a chance to do a bit of talking to them, tell them what we think should be done in a way that they don't often share with each other. But as I say, as a trusted third party, we have some influence there. And we do, a key aspect is our support to small and medium enterprises in the innovation arena. Another boast about what we do, companies we work with, you can prove that they're better off having worked with us. 7 times more likely to get a grant, 4 times more likely to receive private investment, 4 times more likely to be classified as high growth, and those other aspects there. So that's what we do. So for South Wales, our key focus, because we do, we are a UK-wide company, organisation, but we have a team of over 12 people in Pembroke Dock now. And in fact, with distance working, we've actually got other people working for other parts of ORE Catapult based in Wales as well. So the total Welsh population of ORE Catapult employees is probably 16 to 18. On the left-hand side, our SME innovation support, that's what we're doing mainly through MEECE, and Magnus will tell you much more about that later. But we can bring into South Wales some wider Catapult programs, OWGP, Fit for Launch Academy West, and I'll mention those in a tiny bit more detail later. We're also we can't emphasize how fast the last 2 topics have grown up the agenda down here, floating wind and green hydrogen. Floating wind at the moment is all about the Celtic Sea. ScotWind in Scotland has had a successful round of leasing of seabed for floating wind. That's coming up in the Celtic Sea. It's going to be enormous, and the potential for South Wales companies to get involved is going to be big. So I've put the URL for the Celtic Sea cluster in the chat. Please, if you think you've got anything to offer that sector, sign up there, at least have a browse. There's also what's known as the Celtic Sea Developers Alliance. We're very closely aligned with that. And we've recently done work with Welsh Government on ports and grid. Those are the 2 key aspects of floating wind at the moment, the barriers, if you like, that need to be got over if we're going to be successful. ORE Catapult also leads the Floating Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence, which is a kind of virtual organisation, but based out of Glasgow. And that's, if you want to engage with them, talk to us and we can find your routes into that. Just very recently, green hydrogen, massive opportunities, a little bit in the future, but Wales has both a need and the potential to produce. So we would think, as ORE Catapult, that most of the floating wind that gets developed in the Celtic Sea over the next couple of decades will end up one way or another producing hydrogen rather than being plugged into an electrical grid. So we run out of Pembroke Dock, we run the Milford Haven Energy Kingdom project. We're through that project very closely aligned with the South Wales Industrial Cluster, and we're on very good terms Energy Systems Catapult. But we also run UK-wide projects in the green hydrogen theme. To go back to the left-hand side, those wider Catapult programs. So Offshore Wind Growth Partnership, that's funded by the Offshore Wind Industry Council, but it's led by Catapult. It's actually a separate company, but we provide the leadership for it. The industry has dedicated £100 million of its own money over 10 years to the work that OWGP does. And that's all down to the sector deal that the offshore wind industry brokered with BEIS and Treasury. And that OWGP gives a mix of grant funding, direct grant funding to companies, and also provides services directly into the supply chain. It's a very complicated, big initiative. So I would suggest you check that URL out, have a look around, browse through it. But if you're really interested, contact us in the Wales office in Pembroke Dock, and we'll see what we can do for you there. And the other three support programs, these are all active in some part of the UK or another. They all need regional funding. So if we want to be launching these in Wales, we need some local funding, and obviously we'll be thinking about that from the Shared Prosperity Fund point of view. There's also industry interest in funding these things, but we have to shape them up and launch them locally. And some of my colleagues in our Wales team in Pembroke Dock will be helping to do that as well. So West, that's funded to some extent through OWGP, short and sharp intervention. And you can find out a bit more about that on the OWGP website. Fit for Offshore Renewables, that's an extension of the Fit for Nuclear programme, which ran pretty successfully in Wales, in particular in North Wales, when Wilfer was on the cards. We have resurrected it with a new focus on offshore renewables, and we'll be bringing that almost certainly to South Wales and North Wales soon, because we have very significant buy-in from industry to fund that. And a slightly newer opportunity, our Launch Academy. That's for smaller, newer technology companies who may be at the lower TRL levels, but who are looking to grow and to bring their new technologies and their innovations into the offshore renewable energy sector. So that's really all I wanted to say about that. There's some contact details. Magnus will have more local contact details. We're happy to hear from anyone who thinks they might benefit from any of this. In 10-15 minutes, I just can't do justice to everything we have on offer. So contact us and we can deal with you on a one-to-one basis. So I think I'll leave that just there, if that's okay.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. It definitely sounds as though businesses that think they might be able to benefit from being in the supply chain for these sectors should get in touch. And I wondered, I haven't got time to ask you a question now because we've used your speaking time, but you might use the chat to just give a bit of an overview of what kinds of things the offshore renewables sector needs, because I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding. It's not just kind of turbine manufacture, is it? I'm sure there's a whole array of different goods and services that are needed by the sector.
There are, and it's almost too wide to talk about. We need companies who can supply right from the basics. A lot of it is steel and welding, but then that steel needs to be coated. Things need to be moved around. because particularly in Wales, there are very few yards like they are in Scotland where you can simply build everything and bring your supply chain to that site. So what we have is individual companies were doing a bit of welding, a bit of coating on that, then shipping it to somebody else who integrates that into a larger sub-assembly, what we call secondary steelwork. So for floating platforms, very big, currently steel structures, 70 meters by 70 meters by several hundred tons of steel as the basic floating platform, but then we build a load of stuff on top of that. So we build enclosures for electrical control systems. There's, power and water go into them a lot. You've got heating and cooling systems. As John, I think, was saying, one of the big problems is that you might end up with a tier 1 contractor, an EPC contractor, who already has their own supply chain. However, you need to remember that there's massive pressure on offshore wind developers now for UK supply chain content. They're looking for every possible way of being able to justify a bigger percentage of the overall buying as being UK. From the point of view of the Celtic Sea, those developers who are bidding in to get contracts for difference, even as far as getting consents from Crown Estate for their bit of seabed, need to be able to tell a really good story about how much their spending will be in the UK. And, where Welsh Government's involved, the companies want to persuade Welsh Government that it will be Welsh content as well. I really do suggest that if you've got anything that you think, John, I was thinking John's high integrity doors, the blast doors. I'm not entirely sure whether they would be useful on a floating wind platform. But as time goes on, those platforms may be generating hydrogen actually at sea. And then, blast doors might suddenly become something that they'd be interested in. But I would try to persuade people to sign up to the Celtic Sea cluster, because that is the supply chain representative body for floating wind in the Celtic Sea. And maybe as time goes on, we'll be able to be more specific about our asks for the supply chain.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's helpful. And just to flag up, that link is in the chat, CelticSeaCluster.com. We'll share that with you afterwards, but it sounds like businesses should sign up to that to be made aware of opportunities.
And Dawn, can you just confirm that my screen and everything's back to where it needs to be?
Yeah, we've sorted that out. You're
Brilliant.
back to where you need to be. That's great. Thank you, Paul. All right. Well, let me bring in Magnus now then from MEECE. I would love you to tell us what MEECE stands for, Magnus, and talk to us for 5-10 minutes from your perspective.
Great. Can you just confirm that you can hear me, first of all?
We can. Yes, we
Perfect.
can hear you and see you. That's great.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Can you see that screen now, Dawn?
Well done. Very smooth. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so building on from what Paul talked about, and as the ORE Catapult organisation itself, I'm going to talk about the Marine Energy Engineering Centre of Excellence. That's the only time I'm going to say it out in full. It's much easier to say MEECE, I'm sure you can appreciate, but that's what it stands for. This is very much our flagship project that we're running in Wales. It's a fairly sizable project. We are, as Paul briefly mentioned, running other projects in Wales at the moment, but this is certainly the biggest. And I wanted to provide an overview just in case it was of interest to some of the companies on the line today. So just to begin, as a bit of a background, the project itself really is about supporting businesses in Wales, supporting them in the process of developing new products and services for the marine sector. And as Paul said, we do that through collaborative R&D activities. So we have funding to basically carry out research on your behalf to help you develop new products and services. That could be a collaboration with ourselves, but the project is also run in partnership with 4 Welsh universities. They are Bangor, Cardiff, Cardiff Metropolitan and Swansea. So we've got them on board, we've got their expertise available to the project as well. So if there's something that we can't do, we can also tap into their expertise to help you develop new products and services. Some projects might even involve, a number of those partners, and we've got examples of that already. We're part funded by the European Regional Development Fund through WEFO. And as I said, it's all about placing Welsh companies at the heart of the UK's growing offshore renewable energy sector. We're also part funded through the Swansea Bay City Deal programme. We're part of a project called Pembroke Dock Marine. This is a project run by 4 separate organisations I've listed here. I'm just going to briefly mention what Pembroke Dock Marine is. It's about establishing a world-class marine energy and engineering fabrication, test and deployment hub in Pembrokeshire. So we're already seeing a lot of activity in Pembrokeshire around the port. A lot of supply chain companies are choosing to set up offices here to support the growing amount of offshore renewables activity in the region. I would expect, we're very much expecting something similar to happen in Port Talbot, given the the facilities available there, and the potential for Port Talbot to play in supporting floating wind deployments in the Celtic Sea. Okay, so that's enough about the background and the funding. What's perhaps more interesting is to talk a little bit about what MEECE can do. I've tried to summarize this in 4 bullet points, but generally the support available is quite wide-ranging. A lot of the support that we offer through MEECE is in the design of new products and components. And then secondly, seeing those prototypes or components tested, verified or validated. So that's quite physical work that we tend to get involved with and we can support with. We also offer a range of kind of desktop type services, where for example, we may help you evaluate things like the technical feasibility of an idea that you have. Its economic viability. We do a lot of cost modeling work at the Catapult, for example, as well as just things like the market potential, helping you understand if there is a market for you and your idea or innovation. As I've already touched on, because we run in partnership with 4 academic institutions, we can also use MEECE funding to provide access to expertise at the universities. Maybe that's a relationship you already have with a department at one of these universities, or we can also help you, make new introductions to departments that we think may be able to help you develop a new product or service. Just to briefly touch on the eligibility, I think, and I hope anyway, I had a quick look at some of the organisations on the call, and I'm assuming that most are in the kind of Neath, Port Talbot, Swansea, maybe even Carmarthenshire region. The good news for you is that you are all eligible for our support. Essentially, we're able to support companies in the West Wales and the Valleys region, which is the dark pink region shown on this map. We can work with other companies that aren't in this region if they can demonstrate a benefit to the region, or they could form a consortium whereby at least one company is based in the region. That would also be a way of working with an out of area company. In terms of the support that's available, we don't ask companies to make financial contributions to projects, but I should also make it clear that the support we offer is kind of, you get access to our time, and we can fund things on your behalf, for example, or the universities can do that. there are no grants available, unfortunately. We don't issue grants to cover your time. So when we work collaboratively with you, we would, the only thing we would expect from you is to kind of put your own time into the project. Essentially, the more you put in, the more you get out, kind of thing. But I think it's still a very attractive offer. Just having access to Catapult or the support available at any of the academic institutions to basically do work on your behalf. Okay, that's enough about the background. I think probably the easiest way to make it clearer as to what we do and offer is to talk about a few projects we're currently running through MEECE. The first is a project with a company called Intelligent Marines. They are a North Wales-based SME. They're developing a technology called the Intelligent Marine System, or IMS for short. That's a technology that aims to reduce floating wind costs by minimizing mooring forces. So it's essentially like a large shock absorber that gets placed on the end of a mooring line. It dampens the forces that mooring line would experience, and that in turn enables you to use lighter or lower grade steel chain, for example, which is cheaper. And then, in the overall, there is a net saving by having that system in place. So when they approached us, they had tested the device in a laboratory. They'd proven that it worked in that kind of setting, controlled environment, but they needed to make the step to do real world testing and get experience of operating their device in a real world environment. So that is very much what the project we're running with them is all about. And that will move them through the technology readiness level scale to TRL 7. To just kind of go into specifics about what we funded in that project. So we helped fund the prototype and the components that were required in that, as well as some of the sensors. We also funded the commissioning of the prototype ahead of the sea trials. And then lastly, we're taking responsibility and covering the costs of getting the device itself tested at sea, which is what we're doing locally in the Milford Haven waterway. So just last month, we put a research buoy out into the waterway, as you can see pictured here. And that IMS device will form part of the mooring system of this test buoy. So it's obviously not on a floating wind platform at the moment, but this is kind of a stepping stone approach to testing them at a lower scale in a real world environment, such that they can learn the lessons that they need to make and kind of reduce costs and a reduced scale before scaling up their technology to suit the needs of a floating wind platform. While I'm on the slide, it's worth just mentioning that this is a research asset that we own and operate now in Wales. It can be configured to support the testing of a number of things. So if it's something that anyone that's listening think may be of benefit, we can put sensors on it, or we can strap materials to it and get them tested in a real world environment. Please do reach out to us and let us know if that is something that appeals to you. Okay, so that's some of the work we're doing locally. Paul mentioned that we own and operate a number of assets elsewhere in the country. The picture on the right shows you an offshore turbine that we operate in Scotland. It's offshore just because it's actually, as you can see, connected by shore by a short ramp, but it is in the marine environment. This is a research turbine. It's a fairly sizable machine. It's 7 megawatts. And this is a project with a company called Natural Power. That's a UK-wide consultancy, but they have an office in Wales. And they were interested in the development of vortex generators. Vortex generators, again, I'm not going to go into too many details, but these are essentially small aerodynamic devices that you stick on wind turbine blades. and that improves the performance of the wind turbine. They obviously needed a wind turbine to test this technology. And of course, as I said, we have one in Scotland that we can make available to projects, and that is something that would, be an option to companies in Wales through MEECE as well. We can also provide things like data from the turbine as well, as an example. This is quite a big project. There's also support being provided by Swansea Uni. They're doing CFD modelling work in the project, as well as carrying out wind tunnel testing in a fairly new facility that was added to their Bay campus in the last 3 or 4 years, I believe.
Just conscious of time, Magnus.
Okay, thank you. The last slide then. I wanted to mention this project as well. This is for a company called Applied Petroleum Technology. I wanted to mention it because, as the name suggests, they previously did all of their work in the petrochemical oil and gas sector. They approached us about a product they have, or a service which they use to help identify oil wells. They thought it was a service that could be used or converted to identify good sites for offshore wind projects. So we're not only helping them develop that product, but we're, by kind of collaborating with us, we're helping them diversify and transition into the offshore renewables sector. So I just thought I'd mention that in case, I guess a lot of the companies online today are probably at the moment working in other sectors. Okay, again, I'm available for questions now. I'll share these slides afterwards. There's a contact email address and website on this slide. If anyone wants to drop us a line and find out about more information about MEECE afterwards, do let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Great to have some case studies. I think it makes it real for people to understand the kinds of ways in which you can support businesses. And again, do share links in the chat for email addresses and such, so that businesses can get in touch directly. We might have some time for some Q&A at the end. But in the meantime, I would like to move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much, Magnus. That was really interesting. Okay, so the next speaker we have, this is our final speaker of this afternoon, is Jay Shepherd from Marine Energy Wales. Jay, if you're there, it would be great.
Can I just check that you can hear me? Is that working?
We can indeed, and we can
That's great.
see you. Yes, lovely.
Cool. So leading on from those two presentations just now from Magnus and Paul, I'm going to try and contextualize the marine energy opportunity a little bit. Now, can I just check that you can all see my screen,
Perfect.
the full presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So I represent an organisation called Marine Energy Wales. We are the trade association for the marine energy industry here in Wales. So we do lots of different things, but we can kind of distill our activity down to being the single point of access for the industry. We talk to everybody working in the sector. So if you've got any questions about the marine energy sector in Wales, we're usually well placed to answer. If not, we can signpost you to the people that can. We cultivate political support and engage decision makers. It's already been mentioned that perhaps lobbying is a bit of a dirty word. We prefer to describe it as political engagement. We have good relationships with Welsh Government and UK Government and do a lot of work to kind of raise awareness of the opportunities in this sector. We inform, educate, raise profile. So we promote our members. We participate in events such as today and educate children in schools as well, really try and disseminate knowledge and information about these sectoral opportunities in marine energy. And then we also facilitate a lot of business to business networking. We're a membership organization of about 70 members. And we put businesses in contact with each other if we think that they'll be quite well placed to support each other in their activity. So we represent 4 broad technology types when we talk about marine energy. So that's tidal stream, tidal range, wave, and floating offshore wind. These are the emerging forms of new renewable energy that can be harnessed from our offshore environment. So rather than getting too much into the nitty-gritty of each of these, I'll kind of contextualize the kind of opportunity in economic terms for how we see the sector growing. So this is some forthcoming data from a socioeconomic report that we put out every year, just to kind of show how much investment has been brought into Wales by this sector to date. So we're currently sitting at about £160 million that's been invested as of this year. It's been increasing year on year. We had a little bit of a slowdown over the last year, we think in part because of some sort of setbacks and supply chain disruption due to COVID. Most of that investment to date has been within the tidal stream industry. So that's like a wind turbine, but in the water capturing the tidal currents. So there's been quite a lot of development up in North Wales, a little bit in Pembrokeshire as well. But a fair chunk from floating offshore wind and wave technology, so floating platforms that can harness the power of waves or support turbine structures. Wales is really a global leader in research in this sector as well. So that's the green. There's been a history of research in quite a few universities. These are the universities that MEECE is partnered with and are well placed to support you through their innovation program. And then some smaller amounts of investment have gone into the supply chain, tidal range, and floating offshore wind to date. Now, when we went out to our members to kind of ask them how much money they're thinking to spend in each of these relevant sectors over the next 5 years, that's what informed this graph that you can see here. So we see in the near term, over the next 5 years, the largest spaces for opportunity being tidal stream and floating offshore wind. So rather than focusing on every specific technology type, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the tidal stream opportunities in Wales and the floating offshore wind opportunities in Wales, as that's where we see the largest pipeline to be in the near term. So tidal stream, a lot of the tidal stream activity in Wales is centered around a project called MEECE in Anglesey. So it's a test and demonstration zone that will be up to 240 megawatts. So this is going to be the largest pre-consented tidal stream site in the world. It's a really internationally significant project for tidal stream. So it's pre-consented. That means that the people who run the project handle all the environmental consents, and then technology developers come in and plug in their technology, run them for a few years at a time, maybe deploy multiple devices, and that will be a real important step in bringing down the costs of this technology type, and it's sort of the stepping stone towards it being fully commercial, like we see with the likes of offshore wind. So the site itself got the green light from Welsh Government in December. Construction's currently underway, and they're planning on welcoming an international cohort of developers to the sites from 2024 onwards. There'll be a lot of other innovation kind of going on around this area. They've got a £6 million environmental monitoring plan to make sure that the devices don't cause any harm to the marine environment. And yeah, we saw from the figures on the last slide, this could potentially bring in up to around £200 million of investment into the area over the next 5 years. And then Welsh Government is quite committed to backing this project and is also considering how they can provide revenue support to tidal stream developers. So just to kind of make a little bit more sense to you, if you're perhaps not that familiar with this industry, these are just some of the technology developers that we work with that are planning on coming and deploying to this site. Some of them are then therefore looking for supply chain companies that can help feed into their pipeline and develop their technology and to deploy it in Wales. So these are two Scottish developers. Just kind of shows that tidal turbines don't always look the same. The one on the left is a floating structure for ease of access for maintenance. And then we have a smaller bottom mounted one on the right hand side here. Some other designs here. So this is Tocado, probably one of the most tested turbines globally. There's two different companies have a joint share in this particular turbine and have different methods of deploying it to the sea. These are some of the other turbine developers as well. Again, another floating mounted ones in Magallanes Renovables, and here we have a Spanish company, sorry, and Verdant Power, an American company with another bottom-mounted turbine that sits on a tri-frame. So this is one that's currently been tested in New York. So these are just examples of some of the technology developers that will be coming to Wales to deploy their technology. So MEECE project is located at point A on the map here, but we do have other tidal projects happening in Wales. So B, there's a Swedish company that have set up a manufacturing base in Holyhead. They have plans to deploy their technology west of the MEECE zone once that site is consented. Nova, one of the technology developers I showed you in one of the previous slides, they have a project funded by Welsh Government on the Clean Peninsula to help decarbonise Innisfree, Bardsey Island. And then there's also a historic site in Pembrokeshire where a turbine has been sitting on the seabed inactive for a number of years, and there's plans to take that out and deploy a new turbine as well. So in terms of what are the supply chain opportunities for tidal stream, we've been speaking with all of those companies that we've just listed there to try and find out a little bit more about, you know, what do they need to manufacture and deploy their devices, and this is what they've come back to us with. So I'll just leave it up there for a moment to give you a chance to kind of read through. I'm not going to whittle them all off one by one. If you do want more information on this, I can provide the slides afterwards, and you're more than welcome to follow up with me if you do have any questions. I'll have my email at the end of this presentation. So yeah, lots of different things that need to be manufactured to feed into a tidal turbine. At the moment, these are all quite bespoke. In that each device is, as you saw, is quite different. So each developer will have slightly different requirements with each of these components. But with the state that the industry is at the moment, we're moving towards that point of commercialization, as I said. So we're looking at having multiple devices being made by each one, as opposed to, you know, single one-offs. So we're at that point of moving towards that expansion of volume manufacture, where we're expecting to see some standardization of some of these components, but we're not quite there yet. So that's tidal stream. I'll now talk a little bit about floating offshore wind. So this region off to the west of Wales, sort of sitting between Cornwall and Ireland, is known as the Celtic Sea. And there's going to be a lot of floating offshore wind development here over the coming decades. So the reason being here for this is the water's a lot deeper. We haven't had offshore wind development in this part of Wales because the water's too deep to have a fixed bottom. So the floating technology really allows you to put offshore wind essentially, theoretically, anywhere. But yeah, the Celtic Sea with its deeper waters is primed for development here. Some initial studies by the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult have estimated that somewhere between 298 and 630 million pounds could be spent regionally just for an initial 500 megawatt project, but it's been estimated that there could be anywhere up to 50 gigawatts of potential in this region. So the graph I showed you earlier was just for the next 5 years. The deployment pipeline for floating offshore wind in this region will continue to grow well into the 2030s and beyond. So yeah, this is just a little bit of an explanation of the technology when we talk about floating offshore wind. So as I kind of said about the deeper water, historically we've had these fixed bottom pieces. And there's a few different ways then of creating floating platform technology. Most of the ones that are currently being proposed are this semi-submersible design, but there are other alternatives as well. And as the industry moves forward, they'll be looking for the easiest, the cheapest kind of design to put forward on a mass scale. So there will be, again, some sort of standardization emerging as we move forward. We at Marine Energy Wales work with a lot of the ports. So this is just some future plans for Port Talbot. We work quite closely with ABP, but they're quite bought into the floating offshore wind opportunity. We really need that port buy-in in order to be able to manufacture these things in Wales. If we don't have the port investment, a lot of these things will unfortunately be manufactured overseas, and towed in means we'll miss out on that economic opportunity associated with that. But as I said, the ports are very much bought into this opportunity, and they will be the gateway to supply chain opportunities in this sector. If you're interested in feeding into the supply chain for floating offshore wind, Paul's already mentioned it and put the link in the chat. The Celtic Sea cluster, or the Celtic Sea supply chain cluster, is the best avenue to kind of detail your skills, your capabilities, and that'll be run by the Catapult. And again, it'll kind of help with finding companies that are well suited to feeding into the floating offshore wind market. This just kind of gives you a bit of a contextualization of how large these floating structures are. I mean, you can just about see a few little specks of people. There's a little forklift there. You know, it's almost an infrastructure project in itself, ramping up the manufacturing capability in order to be able to make these things. But yeah, just to kind of contextualize, you know, how big an opportunity this is to be manufacturing these things here in Wales. So when we spoke to a lot of our members that are involved in floating offshore wind about what they needed, it's not so much about these smaller bespoke parts as we saw with tidal stream. It's more about sort of key constraints in terms of volume and material capability. So heavy lift cranes, steel and concrete manufacturing, the ability to make cables, the space and capacity to work these materials, port-side infrastructure. These are all the kind of things that are quite important. I won't go through them all in too much detail for the sake of time, but again, happy to share my slides with anybody who wants any further information afterwards. And yeah, that's it. There's my email address if you want to know more. As I said, we're a membership organisation, so if you are quite serious about wanting to work in this sector, we do work and support our members to help them gain work in the sector. So I can also provide more information about membership rates and what our value offering is to our members if that's of interest to you. So thank you for listening to me today, and hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an overview of where we see marine energy growing in Wales over the coming years.
Thank you, Jay. It's just massive, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to really get across this kind of scale of the opportunity, but you know, the supply chain opportunity in particular, isn't it? And I guess that's what you're really here to underline for local businesses, particularly in the engineering sector. Yeah, super. Well, we've pointed you guys to it a number of times during today's call, and Jay has just mentioned it again, and I've shared the link in the chat to the CelticSeaCluster.com. It sounds as though, you know, the future of the region is heavily invested into floating offshore wind and the other marine energy opportunities that Jay has outlined, and others on the call today. So from Neath Port Talbot Council and from ourselves here at the Neath Port Talbot Innovation Exchange, we can only emphasise that opportunity and really underline to local businesses, please do register with the Celtic Sea Cluster if you think there might be something you do or could do that could feed into that supply chain. And I think that sounds really, really worthwhile. Massive thanks to our speakers for coming and kind of underlining what the huge opportunities are. I don't know if there are any questions on the call, and would welcome anyone with a question to speak up now. But if not, we will be circulating this recording to the full membership of the forum, and I think there are others in our network that would be really keen. And I can see from some discussion in the chat that there'll be some follow-ups after this meeting, reaching out to businesses that are on the call and making sure that you're able to engage with the opportunities that are on the horizon and happening now. So yeah, it's exciting, and we do hope that it will lead to new innovations, new business opportunities, and new commercial opportunities for local firms. So thanks again to all our speakers. We'll be sharing a list quite soon of upcoming events, and we're looking for a business in the county who might wish to host a kind of summer networking party for the Innovation Exchange. So if you think you'd like to invite members to come and have a buffet lunch at your industrial facility, then please get in touch with Helen, because we're open to ideas of where we might want to host that. Obviously we'll pay for that buffet lunch, but we'd love to provide that opportunity for us to go and visit someone's premises somewhere in the county. And yeah, we'll share a list of upcoming events. We've mentioned our intention to get the MOD to come and talk about their supply chain opportunities, and I think one of the speakers mentioned it this afternoon about this emphasis and this pressure on contractors and on organisations to demonstrate that they've got UK supply chains and Welsh supply chains, and so that is the opportunity, and I think that's the same for the MOD. They are really under pressure to show that they are working with UK-based firms, and that's why we want to make sure they are aware of who the businesses are in this region, so that we can maximise that opportunity for economic development. If there are no further questions from partners in the room today, I think I will wrap up. I promised you we'd be done by 2:30, so pretty much on time. Thank you again very much to our three speakers from the marine and renewable sector. That's been really, really insightful. And thanks to those businesses that came along and shared your perspectives. That is all feeding in to help shape what this forum looks like going forward. Thank you to Adil and your team in the council. And we will be in touch with dates for upcoming events and hope to see you again soon. That's all for today. Goodbye for now.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.